The Drum Candy Podcast is brought to you by Drum Factory Direct.
What's up, everyone? Welcome into episode 10 of season 4 of the Drum Candy Podcast. This is your host, Mike Dawson, coming to you from Drum Factory Direct in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. This week's guest is Mark Stepro. Mark is currently on tour with the Wallflowers in support of their latest record, Exit Wounds, and he's also been, for the past 13 years, the drummer for the great producer-songwriter Butch Walker. In addition to his work with the Wallflowers and Butch Walker, Mark has also appeared on records with Train, Panic at the Disco, Jewel, Keith Urban, Gavin DeGraw, Brian Fallon of the Gaslight Anthem, and Rob Thomas of Matchbox 20, among many others. In this interview, we cover everything from the gear that he's using with the Wallflowers, how he sets up his InEar mix, how he developed his internal pulse, how to properly play the song One Headlight, and much more. Super fun hang, and let's get to it with Mark Stepro. So tell me what's happening now. Are you in between legs with the Wallflowers?
Yeah, so what we're doing is, so that group generally goes out 3 to 4 times a year for about a month at a time. And we just did one in April, and we're going to do another one in late July to late August, and then another one from late September to late October. And it's really good for me because this is kind of the first time in a long time, first time in my memory where I kind of know what's happening through the rest of the year. Like I've got kind of essentially a schedule for the rest of the year. And if nothing comes in beyond this, it's totally fine and I can float it. That's nice. Cause usually it's like you end a tour and then you're kind of waiting around like, okay, is there going to be another one? If so, when? But I feel like that group is pretty reliable. It really kind of shows you, it's really demonstrative of what the power of radio hits back in the day does for an artist's career, because Jakob Dylan is able to basically tour 4 months out of the year, I guess, for as long as he wants. Mm-hmm. And he kind of went, I think, my understanding is he went to his booking agent and said, I want to tour 3-4 months out of the year. And the booking agent said, cool. You can't play New York City 4 times a year. Like, you know what I mean? Like you can't play Chicago and LA 4 times a year. So what I can do is I can put you in a 900-seat theater in Champaign, Illinois, and Eugene, Oregon, and Smyrna, Georgia, and all these places. And Jacob said, cool, sounds great. So in July, for example, no sooner do I say that, we are going to play the Prospect Park Bandshell in Brooklyn. But then I would say the majority of the tour is just kind of 900-seat theaters in tertiary markets, because it's late enough in the year that we've already played New York, we've already played LA, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm.
So what do you do in between legs? You said you don't have to work, but do you try to fill your calendar when you're not on the road?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I was playing last night at this place in Hollywood called Gold Diggers. I'm doing a recording session this weekend. I just kind of fill it in. It's I don't know, like I'm sure everybody's like, a lot of guys are like this, where it's just like, because it's not like a retainer, you know what I mean? It's not just my full-time job. But it is, I don't know. It's like if you have any creative business, if you're a web designer or if you're a lighting designer and you have like maybe one client that occupies a larger part of your portfolio, so to speak, than other people. So that accounts for a decent part of it. But then, yeah, the rest of it is just fills in with whatever comes in LA. I have a 7-year-old son and I have a wife who works and who really likes her job. So it's a little tricky for me. Basically, I don't hop off of a Wallflowers tour and immediately go try to find another tour. I try to do what I can around town, whether that's a little bit of recording. I mean, I'm certainly not like I don't make my living recording drums. I don't think there's like 5 people in the world that do that. But I just kind of fill in the gaps, because the other thing is I don't want to lose that gig. And I mean, Jakob Dylan is going to keep going kind of regardless. So it's kind of my chair to lose. So if I did find some other tour in between a Wallflowers tour and then that tour conflicts, then I've got a whole bunch of headaches that, I spent many years of my life playing that video game, and it's not, it's stressful, and it's like very ulcer inducing when you see something pop up on the calendar that overlaps with the other thing on the calendar and you're like, oh God, what do I do?
What do you do? Do you have subs that you can rely on, or how you go to the management? How does that get dealt with.
In this particular case, I had to do that this past fall because the reason that I'm even in this play with this group is because of a producer called Butch Walker, who I've worked with for 13 years. And Butch Walker is an artist who kind of evolved into this career as a producer, and he produces all these big records or whatever, and he made a Wallflowers record. He's been friends with Jacob for years, and he wanted to do a tour, and he tours very, very infrequently. It's like every year and a half, and it's for about 3 weeks at a time. And he wanted to do this fall tour, and I love him, and I have all this loyalty to him. And I said, you want to do these dates? And I said, shoot, dude, I actually can't because I've got Wallflowers booked. And he was like, okay, what if I move my tour so that you can do it?
Okay.
Yeah, and I made that exact expression that you just made. And I went, yeah, that sounds good. So we do that, right? I locked that in with Wallflowers management. And then all of a sudden Wallflowers management comes back with like, oh, by the way, hey guys, we're extending the tour by 4 weeks. And I'm like, oh God. So, but in that case, what I had to do was I had to go to Jacob and I was like, dude, I told you, like, first, number one, I already told Butch that I couldn't do his tour because of your thing. Like, I honored your thing. And Butch was okay with that. And he moved his thing to accommodate essentially your thing. I can't ask him to do it again because you guys have added dates after, and I get it. Like, I'm just a drummer. Like, you guys are obviously going to do what you're going to do. And I just have to kind of fit into it or not. But I'm telling you, I can't bail on Butch because you guys added dates. And Jacob completely understood. He was totally cool about it because, the thing that kind of, you had that question is actually oddly specific in this case because there's a lot of nuance in there insofar as I wouldn't even be in that group if it wasn't for Butch. Mm-hmm. But Butch put me on that record that they made. And then Butch basically said to Jacob, when Jacob was getting a new crew together, Butch was like, you should use these guys, and basically put me on it. So for me to then hit Butch back up and be like, oh, dude, actually, I know I told you I could do that tour, but sorry, Wallflowers, you know how it is, like, I didn't want to bail on him like that. And it ended up working out. They got a sub, and it was kind of cool. It was somebody else's sub. It was kind of interesting. Somebody else in the group stepped up and, like, because I went to management and I was like, look, I can do this however you want to do this. I can find a guy. I can call up Mike Dawson in Pittsburgh. I can get somebody ready for you. Or if you guys would rather handle it on your end because you don't want to feel like I'm pushing my guy on you, you can pick somebody, whatever. And they said, actually, the keyboard player found somebody, so you literally don't have to do anything. And I was like, fantastic.
Yeah, I assume that band has a bit of a Rolodex of players who've kind of come in and out of their circle, right?
Huge. I mean, it's to me, I always refer to that band as like it's like the roots rock, like Steely Dan, basically. Even if you think about it, I don't know how familiar you are with that group, but like going back to that big record that he made all those years ago with like One Headlight and all that. If you look at those album credits, it's Chamberlain on drums, it's Mike Campbell on guitar, it's Ben Mon on organ. It's just a bunch of like LA hotshots, basically. Which is actually, I was huge into that record in college for that reason, because I was like, oh my gosh, living in LA and being a studio guy seems like such a cool thing to do. And this record is a really cool intersection for me because it has all the benchmarks of like cool drumming and studio musicianship and clean playing and tightness and blah, blah, blah that you would see on a Steely Dan record. But I also like really, really like the music because it's very adjacent to the stuff that I grew up listening to, which would have been Tom Petty and Bruce Springsteen, the band, and so forth. So that was like I just remember being a kid and just thinking like, man, if I could do that gig, that would be awesome. Mm. And it is, to your point, very much, it's a revolving door. We made that record in 2019 and it's been the same people since then. I think sometimes Jacob probably likes to change it up. I think more likely, like I said to you earlier, like it's not really a retainer gig. So it's like if he takes a year off and then somebody in the band goes on tour with the Sheryl Crow or something, and then that leads to a full-time thing, and then Jacob wants to tour again, and then that person's not available anymore. It's a little bit like that. But every once in a while, somebody will make, I don't pay too much mind to this, but somebody will make some kind of a snarky comment about like, oh, it's not even the original guys anymore. I'm like, there are no original guys. It's just, it's Donald Fagen and Walter Becker, you know what I mean? Like, and some guys. And like right now I'm one of the guys. And then at some point I won't be, whether that's my decision or his decision, that's just how it goes,
Yeah, that's just an ignorant comment because Matt played on the record. Was Mario the first touring drummer? I mean,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
So and then was the original guys ever.
Yeah, exactly. It was like the original drummer was literally like Jacob's friend from high school. And then I think maybe once they wanted to make a quote unquote real record, maybe that guy wasn't ready. And it was in the 90s when it was very en vogue to be like, we got to get a session drummer, or whatever. Now my 7-year-old son could probably just play a beat and then you could just massage it into sounding okay. But yeah, so, and who else did it? So Mario, who I don't know, did it. Fred Eltringham, who I know and adore, did it. That drummer Jack Irons from Pearl Jam did it for a minute. Yeah. So it's cool. It's kind of a cool, I don't know. I don't mean to, I hope I don't sound like I'm big timing, but it's like kind of a fun little lineage to be a part of. And like I said, I'll keep doing it as long as they'll have me.
Yeah. I have two questions here. So the first thing is you mentioned training a sub, and that's a topic I don't think is discussed enough. So if you had to sub out a week or a couple dates, what would you do to get someone prepared for that?
That's a great question. First thing I would do, are we going to start with the assumption that it's my job to find the sub?
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay. Yeah, because like I said, I don't know. It has to do super quick sidebar. I think it just has to do with like Jacob Dylan's dad being one of the most famous people on the planet for many, many years, and Jacob also being essentially a rock star for a lot of years. They're pretty, in that specific group, they really prioritize people that they've known for a long time.
Yeah,
so any person that I bring or that anybody else brings that they've never heard of is going to be a little bit side eye, a little bit like, oh, now who is this? What are you doing? Anyway, let's just assume that I've got the keys to go find a sub. So what I would do, there's a couple things. I have a couple board recordings of the set. And I like to jokingly say, like, I know it's not the easiest gig to sub as a drummer, just because I know where all the bodies are buried in that set. Meaning I know all the spots where just through weird, no reason whatsoever over 20 years, the bridge to some song got doubled. Nobody knows why. Nobody knows when. He doesn't even know that he's doing it. So if you asked him, he wouldn't even be able to articulate it. There's like 24 of those in the set. So in other words, like sometimes before we go to do a tour, I'll play through my little like Spotify playlist of our songs, but like every other song I'm like, oh crap, that doesn't, no, disregard that it kind of doesn't help, you know what I mean? Because it's like I have to make a mental note, oh, that section's actually 2 bars longer for some inexplicable reason. So anywho, what I would do is I would get the person that I would offer to let them use my charts, which you know how that goes. It's like that might not mean a thing to somebody else. They might look at my charts and say, I don't know what any of this is. A board mix. I would, it's a little bit of a drag when you do that, because I'm sure you've done this too, but it kind of sucks sometimes because you kind of end up being like an unpaid consultant, because then the dude's like hitting you up every other day going, hey, so like on the bridge of this song, like, what do I do? Like, how much, and you're like constantly like, oh, well, it's this. And you kind of have to do it because it's your job and it's your recommendation. And it's essentially at some level, it's your reputation on the line. So it's in my best interest to make sure that the sub has all the information necessary. You know what I mean? Another thing I do, here's a hot tip. I would then go to Jacob or any band, the band leader, just say the band leader. I keep saying Jacob, but like the band leader. And I would start to, without getting right up to the line of being a pain in the ass, I would be like, hey, so that set, like what songs, like, okay, we've got 58 songs in our catalog, but this gig that this guy's subbing for, you're going to play 17 or 18 songs. You think we could maybe pick those 17 or 18 songs now so that guy has the best fighting chance? Like, I'd rather have the guy do an A+ on 17 songs than a B- on 58 songs, just so you can randomly put together a set list 45 minutes before we go on stage. And every time I've ever pitched that to an artist, they've been like, oh yeah, dude, great. Thank you. Totally. That's a totally good idea. Then you have to keep poking at them to actually do it.
Yeah.
but on paper, they understand the reasoning for it. You know what I mean? So that's what I would do. That's my big idea.
How do you deal with tempos with that band specifically, or most bands? Do you go album tempo, or do you start with a click? How do you get to the performance tempo? I
think about this a lot. That gig, I am so freeballing that gig. I'm not doing anything. It's and there are a couple songs that he's pretty fussy about, but not so. I guess I'd kind of just have it relatively internalized. And I think I maybe learned that set list in a kind of more gut level, street level, garage band drummer kind of a way, rather than a trained pro. Like, I don't have any device on stage. First of all, there's no SPDSX, there's no click track, there's no metronome, there's no tracks, there's no nothing. It's pretty OG. Every once in a while, I think, because he really, I dare say, I think he's pretty happy with the band right now, and I think he feels like it's a pretty cruisy little vehicle for him to drive around in. So he'll say, literally day of show, he'll be like, hey, there's this one song in this record that, we've never learned. Say that this is like at 11 in the morning or something, and I'll say, can everybody like make a chart of that, bring it to sound check, and let's run it at sound check? Yeah, okay. And in my chart, I'll notate the BPM, and we'll run it at sound check. And if it makes it into the set, I probably will have my phone up there, and I'll just quick tap 132. Okay, cool. And then off we go.
What about with Butch? Is he more meticulous?
Butch is such a control freak. This occurred to me. I barely count anything off.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's just like either he starts it, either there's like a guitar intro, or he's just like, like Springsteening that shit, I don't know. Yeah, like literally on the last tour after like 13 years, I found myself counting in a song, and I was like, oh my God, I'm counting in a song. You know what I mean? Like, Dad's letting me drive the car. Holy crap. You know what I mean? But if there was, I guess I would just use my little. So I played with my friends, this group called the Mastersons, last night in Hollywood, and they had a lot of new songs in their set. So in that little tempo app on the phone, I would just make a set list, and I would just write the corresponding tempos into the song titles. And similar to like what I was saying with the Wallflowers, like I just reach over and check it before we start. I'm not playing to it, and I'm not following along. I know there's that thing that like kind of monitors your tempo or whatever, like where you can see how you're doing. But most of the people that I play with, I think if I start it where they want it started, it's fine usually.
What did you do throughout your career to develop your time, your inner pulse, your control of that?
I listen to a ton of records that have really good time on them. I also spent a ton of time. This sounds, the way I'm talking, it sounds like I'm like some anti-technology guy. I'm not, and I'm certainly not like an anti-metronome guy. I don't want this to come off like I'm like, yeah, man, we just wing it, like whatever, who cares? Because I care a lot. But I like to believe that it's a bit of a thoughtful practice leads to thoughtless playing thing. Like I did all the work on the front end in terms of getting together a time feel or whatever. And I'm not saying I'm the greatest guy at it, but I have spent a lot of time with it. So one thing that I did to directly answer your question is just, listen to a ton of Steely Dan records, and, records where even like in the 90s, like the Roots records, like stuff that's quantized, just playing along. There's 80s records that are quantized. Huey Lewis and the News, for whatever reason, like that stuff is pretty metronomic. But then I also have like a whole slate of metronomic practice techniques that I'll use. And all it amounts to is like, mostly what I'll do is, sorry, I'm going to take a drink of coffee. to me, the idea of playing along to a quarter note click track that's just hammering the downbeat and the quarter note all the way. I mean, I guess it's good if you can follow along to that, but to me, in a way, that's sort of like bumper bowling, right? Like it's like you kind of can't mess it up because it's just telling you where the quarter note is. All you have to do is hit along. You know what I mean? Like, so it's like, well, all right. So what can we do? All right, let's just adjust in our ear, in our mind's ear, where that click is hitting. Okay. So the thing that I'll do is, this isn't like groundbreaking, I'm sure everybody does this, but like I'll adjust in my mind. So if say the click is really slow, maybe somewhere in, I don't know, like 60, like. So what I'll do is I'll mute the first 3 quarter notes. So, or the last 3, whatever you want to call it. So 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4. Now that's hard enough. But then what I'll do is I'll readjust it in my mind so that click addresses the of 4. Oh. So it's like 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E. So in other words, you have 15 16th notes to be a grown up, and you know what I mean, and like monitor yourself, and it'll tell you on that 16th note how you did.
Wow.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's next level.
Because you either land it or you don't. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
And you just start out just like anything, just playing like a really, really basic. Just try to play time to that, which is a significant investment of your time. And then slowly you can start improvising and trying to flow, so to speak, with just that. So I do that. I did that a lot. I still do it. And I think, doing that enough combined with a lot of active listening makes it so that I can, I'm not perfect, but I can have it occurs to me like I have a decent recall for tempos. Like I don't have a very good recall for form. Like I really have to work hard, and I have to play a song a lot of times to memorize it. But I can usually get the tempo dialed up pretty easily.
Do you ever have conversations with anyone after the gig? Like, how did everything feel? Or someone come to you say, man, that was a little bit slow tonight or something. Do you have that at this point?
No, not in that group. Not in Butch's group. Once in a blue moon, it'll come up. And usually it'll come up from somebody else in the band. I mean, Jacob, the singer in the Wallflowers, Jacob, I don't know. I just think we've got it pretty well down. If somebody thought that, I would absolutely entertain it, and I would want to track it down and see what's going on. But it doesn't come up a ton. It's really, really interesting to me. I talk about this. My friend Adam Levy and I have talked about this for years. He's a great guitar player living in New York. And it's interesting. If you take kind of like Western diatonic pop music that we all play, if you think about the fundamental elements of that, of say, a Tom Petty song or whatever. So the harmony, the chord changes, the melody, the lyrics, and the form, those are all pretty fixed, right? You're not going to really mess around and just play an extra chorus of Free Fallin' just cause, you know what I mean? But I wonder, and I'm not saying this is the definitive answer, but I just wonder, does it matter if it's 110 or 112? Like say we're in New York and we're really kind of on edge because it's like a big show and all guest list is packed and everybody's there, and it might be a little faster. And then the next night we're down in Philly and everyone's hungover and we had cheesesteaks for lunch, and maybe it's a little slower, and maybe that's okay too. I mean, as long as everybody is interacting with the pulse, as long as everybody's on the same page, I don't really see why it matters to like the granular degree of like X BPM, but that's just me. And I mean, look, if I worked for somebody who was a stickler about it, I would work up to them. I would level up to what they wanted to do. But my personal philosophy is, are we all feeling good? Is everybody cool? Like if everybody's cool, like who cares what the piece of paper says about the tempo,
Yeah. How do you go about learning back catalog music? Do you try to honor the original parts to the minutia, or do you get an essence of it? What's your approach?
a lot of times this sounds like brown nosery, but I'm not a great guitar player, but like I'll just learn the song on guitar and sing it, because to me, and this is just some like, I was in music school for 1 year, but you know, there's a couple super fundamental axioms that you pick up at music school. That's like, if you can sing the tune, you know the tune. You know what I mean? Like if you can play it on a melodic harmonic instrument and sing it, you definitely know the song. My general vibe, like once I get to sit down to the drums, so I'll chart it at my kitchen table with headphones in and nowhere near a drum set. Because that's another lesson I learned. I remember like I was with a teacher when I was a kid, and I wanted him to show me how to play something, and we put the song on, and like almost instantly I started playing along to it incorrectly. This thing that I was paying money asking this guy to show me how to do, and he's just kind of like, okay, yep, just can you hang on just 1 second? Let's just listen to it. And I'm like, okay, yeah. We hit push play again. And within like 7 seconds, I'm like, like trying to do it. And he's like, yo, you need to listen to this song, dude. Like you haven't even listened to it yet. You have a rough idea of how it goes and you're just already jumping in. So it's helpful to me to like just chart the song just using my ears and my hand with a pen, and before I even sit down at the instrument. And then as to how granular, I'm not really copying specific fills or anything like that. Unless the artist is like, hey, song X, Y, and Z, like I really need it to be 100% faithful to the original recording. But even that, it's like, I don't know. So the one fun example of that in the Wallflowers is that song One Headlight, right? And I don't know if you're aware of this, but that song sort of famously doesn't have a crash cymbal on it or whatever.
It's one of my questions. Do you play
crashes? Yeah. Dude, I don't. And I don't. And I love it. But that's an example of like, to me, I would 100% honor the no crash cymbal on that song. And it kind of heightens up the tension the whole time, because the guy's not hit. It does two things. Number one, when that big G chord strum comes in on the chorus, it's huge because there's no cymbals are a drag, and I kind of see why they're out of vogue in popular music, meaning pop music, because it does occupy the majority of the sonic spectrum if you just like detonate a crash cymbal or whatever. So it's kind of cool. And then also, Mark Juliana talks about this, but it's like the dude's not hitting the crash cymbal, and all of a sudden, like after 3 minutes, even people who aren't musicians can feel that tension that the guy hasn't, because the crash cymbal really is an articulation of like a release in some way, tension's in the beat, and the drum fill is even more tension, attention, tension, crash. And that's almost like a big exhale or whatever. And if you don't do that, like, people get nervous, like in a good way. You know what I mean? People are like, oh, what? Okay, when's the, and then you hit it at the end, and it's like, it's a lot more impactful, I guess.
That song, I wanted to pick your brain about this because I play it a lot, and I resist the urge to play crashes, but then some nights it's like, you know what, they just need a crash. And then also the hi-hat pattern. Do you play 8ths or do you fill in the 16ths to cover the shaker part?
I do 16th. Okay, so what do I do? I do 16th note ghosty stuff on my left hand on the snare.
Okay.
And I don't do 4 on the floor. I want to come back to your point about you playing that song with another group. But so I hit up Chamberlain when I started doing that gig, and I don't know Matt. I met him a couple of times, but I don't know him. But I said, hey, I'm playing in this band. Do you remember? Because like I can't tell, if you listen to the recording, I can't tell if it's 4 on the floor or if it's kick on 1 and 3. It's a little hard to say. And he told me what's going on there is there's like a Ringo style floor tom that's very muted with mallets going like doing like the get back beat as an overdub. And so when we play live, the bass on that recording is sort of like it's sort of like Sly and the Family Stone, If You Want Me to Stay, that kind of like short, long. But our bass player plays Why Not Jansfeld, who's one of my best friends. He's an incredible musician. He's subbing with Matchbox 20 right now. He plays with a pick and does kind of junk, 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 junk. And then I just play 1 and 3 on the snare, 1 and 3 on the kick, 2 and 4 on the snare, and ghost in those 16th notes. And sometimes I do those little fills and sometimes I don't. And I just kind of wing that part. And I do kind of take an opportunity in that song with those fills. I kind of try to find where the line is, and I try to get as close to it as possible of like kind of doing my own thing on those. But I wanted to say really quickly, you talking about playing that song, like I've seen bands in Nashville, like on Lower Broadway play that song and stuff. And, you know, everybody talks about, yeah, there's no crash cymbal, but I do it live, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, well, you should do it live. Like, this is back to my earlier concept about tempo. It's like, okay, they made that record. It was 1992 or 93. It was in Burbank or something. It was these guys. It was this month out of the year. They had pizza for lunch. There were all these factors, right? And like none of those, like they're in a recording studio with very expensive microphones, with very expensive preamps, and you're in a bar, and it's a completely different environment. So like, you know what I mean? It's like it's the same thing. Like when guys try to get all with the fat gushy snare drum. Like I love that sound. You love that sound. Everybody loves that sound. Everybody loves the Eagles. It doesn't sound good in a bar sometimes because you have to, when you splat that snare, it just doesn't sound as good as if you have a detuned gushy snare drum and you barely hit it, not with a rim shot, and you crank the preamp, then it sounds like cool. You know what I mean? But all that to say, I'm not one to believe that you have to be super evangelical about interpreting something directly from a record, unless somebody says, hey, I really need you to do that. And then I'll do it. One man's opinion. What do I know?
All right. Great insight. Yeah, I didn't realize there was an overdub floor tom. That makes perfect sense.
Yeah, and that's kind of why you listen to it and you're like, this feels cool and it's awesome, but I can't tell exactly who's doing what here.
Yeah, and probably every bass player covers that with their fingers.
Yeah, I think so.
Interesting. Well, that was pretty nerdy. What is your
I love
it. What is your live rig for the Wallflowers?
Gear wise, it's a Ludwig. What is that thing called? It's they don't make them anymore. Weirdly, Club Date. The thin ply. I think it's. I don't know much about drums, but like gear wise, but like I think it's a 3-ply. They're really skinny. They don't weigh very much. They're very light. 3-ply maple, and it's the one that I'm using right now is that Duco finish with the gold black. Oh yeah. You Classic. Know? Yeah. So I have that one, and I have that one with that group, and that's in 22, 13, 16. But I also have a Club Date in gray blue Duco that's in 20, 12, 14. And I'll use that one for stuff around LA. I play with a guy called Brett Denon, whose music is a little bit more subdued and a little less big drums. So I'll use that. Although I just took out I have like a 75 Olive Badge Gold Sparkle that sounds incredible. It's like a classic maple from the 70s. And I think I'm going to take that one on the next run and see what that one does. Because I think old drums, it's hard to get them to sound really good in big outdoor amphitheaters. You know, I feel like as incredible as those old drums are, I feel like they have like a ceiling to how much they project. But in a 900-seat theater, I think it's absolutely perfect. So I think I'm going to do that next time around.
What's the snare?
Usually a Black Beauty. I'm a basic BITCH. Black Beauty, Acrolite, Superphonic. And I have a couple Acrolite. I have an old Acrolite and a new Acrolite. And I've same as you. It's like I've done a lot of recording, and it's very rare that if I bring those 3 drums to a session that we're not going to have what we need. You know what I mean? Unless somebody wants something really, really specific and treated in a way, you know. But the Black Beauty is the main one, and then I've got the Acrolite down there just in case.
Are they all tuned similar, or are they slightly different?
Yeah, no, they're tuned very medium. They're tuned very middle of the road because I'm going for utility. You know, I want to kind of synthesize I want just the most basic drum sound that will kind of suit a variety of songs, a variety of styles, tempos, and that will fit into most rooms. Once in a blue moon, I'll have the Black Beauty up and be like, why doesn't this sound good? And then I'll put up the Acrolite, and then that sounds good. Because obviously, as you know from recording, it's like the room really dictates a lot and kind of tells you a lot, you know? So if you listen to the room, I start with the Black Beauty, and if there's a huge problem, I'll probably try to tune it into submission. And if that's still not working, I'll just go, I don't know, let's throw up the Acrolite. Let's see what that does. And then it's like, oh, all right, well, that solved that problem. Then it's not the Black Beauty's fault. It didn't do anything that it didn't do yesterday. You know what I mean? You know how that is, just that weird voodoo of like, why does this drum sound bad today? Like what? Nothing changed, you know, although the room changing can obviously, but I've had that happen in the studio. You know, have you ever come back the next day and you're like, yeah, where's my drum that sounded awesome yesterday?
It's like air pressure, humidity, all that stuff.
Or you're just crazy. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's probably me most of the time. I'm like, you know.
Are you like particular about dampening for live? We'll talk about studio in a minute, but for live.
Live, I use the, it's this guy out here in California. I think he plays with Jack Johnson. I think his name's Adam Topol, the Roots EQs. I do the ring, the not the full ones, but do you know what I'm talking about? The ones that are...
They're a cloth dampening ring, right?
It's a cloth dampening ring. It doesn't cover the entire diameter of the drum, although he does make those as well. But I find those are too much. Those are like super dead in a way that definitely wouldn't work live. I would use it. I've used those in the studio periodically if somebody wants to go full Ringo. But I find that the Roots EQs with just the ring on the 13 and 16 totally does the job of 4 or 5 moon gels, but they're not gross and sticky and fall off the drum like moon gels. And then I have this thing, somebody gave this to me. I think it's maybe that Jose guy in Portland. Oh, I think I saw one on your kit, that snare weight thing.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I have one of those on the Black Beauty, and man, that just makes all the difference.
Is that with the leather wings or just the weight?
It's the leather wings. There's, I think maybe you have the one with the actual weight. I don't have the one that has that little thing that sort of like looks like a Zippo lighter kind of on top of it.
Yeah.
I don't have that one. Somebody just gave me the one with the leather wings, and I was like, it really changed the sound of the drum, and it just made everything easier. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It just gets those overtones kind of under control really, really quickly. Now, also, just FYI, quick side rest stop break here. I feel like when you're in the studio, as far as achieving those super dead drum sounds, you ought to be able to do that with tuning. You know what I mean? Like it can be a little bit of a cheat code when guys start throwing those on there. It saves a lot of time. So I get that, you know what I mean? But I wouldn't want somebody to just be like, oh, this is how you get the gushy snare drum. You just put the thing on it, you know? Cause it's like, yeah, that's one way to do it, but you could also learn how to tune the drum and like make it do that. So what I'll do usually, like when I go to a session, like I'll bring those 3 drums that I told you about. And usually the Black Beauty, because I play it live, is usually just tuned medium, but then I'll just show up with one that's already in Eagles Gush town, because I know at some point somebody's going to want to do that. And then that way I can just be like, here, let's just put this up and off we go.
That's another Black Beauty or one of the other drums?
It's the Acrolite. I have the Acrolite way down. Yeah.
So which Super is it, the 6.5 or the 5?
5.
Okay. So your 3 drums are a Acrolite 5x14 Supra and a 6.5x14 Black Beauty?
It's like you've done this before.
That's a trifecta, though. I mean,
it's very classic. It's very basic. But I mean, I don't know, that embodies a lot of my just kind of overall aesthetic and just the way that I kind of live my life. I'm a pretty unflashy, pretty basic, Ray-Bans, Peacoat, Levi's jeans. Like those are things that are never going to be more or less cool than they currently are. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like they're not hip, but they're also not lame. And you can see pictures of people wearing them in the 60s or the 90s or yesterday. And it's just like, oh yeah, okay, cool.
Now, what about drum heads? Are you particular about that?
Coated Emperors on the toms, Ambassador on the snare. So in keeping with our very basic formula. Yeah, I mean, all the gear that I play is all stuff that I it's all the first gear that I saw when I was a kid. Like the school music program had, as far as I recall, Ludwig drums with Remo heads and Zildjian cymbals, and I was always just like, all right, this is, I never really tried to stray too far from that. I always just associate that with this kind of fundamental primary way that I hear how drums sound.
What is your cymbal setup with the Wallflowers?
It changes all the time. I have a set of the Zildjian makes. Well, you do know about gear, so stop. I was going to say stop me if this starts to sound Greek to you, but I know that it won't. So Zildjian makes those things called fat hats. I don't know if you know those.
Yeah. Everybody's raving about those.
They're rad. I have the prototype version. I don't know. You know those? Have you seen those prototype ones? Like when Stanton Moore, that weird crash that he has with the rivets in it. I have one of those too, and it's got like this kind of prototype. So I have those fat hats in 15, and then like a K Dark 19. And a 22 Avidus ride, the new Avidus where it says Avidus in the cursive or whatever. And then I've been using that Stanton Moore weirdo bizarro crash as a right side crash, and it almost sounds like a China or something in a way. It's really abrasive, and that's really good on like a final chorus or something, like an outro where you're really, really bashing and it just kind of kicks into fourth gear because it's just like this extra level of kind of obnoxiousness for the last 8 or 16 bars of the tune. And that Avidus ride is like I've spent a lot of time trying to find, as you have too, just the right balance of like wash and articulation. And in a rock band, I'm usually not in that group, not going full on Keith Moon, like washy crash ride vibe. You know what I'm saying? Usually it's a little bit more just ride, I guess, medium ride playing. That's a technical term. But the Avidus kind of ticks a lot of boxes that way. I adore that company, and it's, I should take a minute to talk about this because like I'm not a very prodigious social media user, and I'm not a very loudmouth ear endorser guy, but I've had relationships with all three of those companies for years and years and years. And in particular, there's a woman at Zildjian named Kirsten Matt, who maybe you know, maybe you don't, but she's kind of the West Coast version of what Sarah Hagen used to be. And she has been so good to me for so many years. And I thank her all the time. I say, I know I don't have 100,000 TikTok followers. I'm really sorry. But I do work a lot, if that makes you feel any better. And I think I've just basically been kind of grandfathered in under, literally because I'm old. Like
not grandfather yet.
Yeah. But my point, I do want to take just a minute to say that I think she's just a wonderful person. And, this is more probably than anybody. It's just like everybody makes great gear, right? Like there's no subpar. I mean, maybe there are some subpar cymbal but the ones that we know and think of in our minds, the major cymbal companies, I can sit down at Meinl or any cymbal company and find incredible instruments, It's just the relationship that I've had with her for years. And the fact that I can take stuff in and take stuff out, and she lets me borrow stuff and blah, blah, blah. And she is just really, really supportive for whatever reason. And I'm super, super grateful for it. And I just wanted to say that.
Beautiful. Yeah, those Avidus, I loved them. And I have the same issue with ride cymbals. It's like I want it to be washy, but then there's never enough articulation. Like that's to me there's still a unicorn out there for me. I haven't found it.
Yeah, I'm glad you're on the hunt for that same unicorn, because sometimes those K Constantinoples or the K Karopes will do that, but then if oddly enough, because they're jazzy cymbals and they're really dark and they're really washy, and they sound really good when you wash out on them, but they're not very articulate, I guess, if you're trying to play rock ride or whatever. Also, you can beat them up pretty easily, I had a K-Con that I just crash rided on it for so many years, and I've got pretty decent technique, so I don't really break cymbals. But what I realized that I did was by essentially gently crash riding on this thing for years, it just got dead.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It stopped vibrating as much. It would not open up anymore. It sounded like a one of those K-Dark customs, you know what I mean?
Oh, wow.
I'm like, why does this not sound like a cymbal anymore? Oh, right, because you've been smashing it for 15 years.
I wonder if it had little tiny cracks you could see or something.
Maybe. Yeah, that's possible.
So a couple things. Let's talk about, well, we're in the live world. So quickly, is there a major difference between playing live with Butch Walker versus playing live with the Wallflowers as far as intensity or what your role is or what's expected or how much you can get away with?
Huge difference. With Butch, I talked earlier about the line, like trying to find the line of like what will make the singer turn around and go, what on earth are you doing? With Butch, I haven't really found it yet. So that group is so fun and very, very expressive. And we're essentially just screwing around up there. And we're kind of like trying to make ourselves laugh. And Butch is, you should check him out. I don't know how aware you are of his music, but he is just a complete virtuoso musician and performer. So when he plays, it is like balls to the wall. He is jumping off stuff. And, people don't want him to open for them because he's a maniac. And so we're up there trying to match that energy and we're going bananas like the whole time. Jacob Dylan, I jokingly refer to as the dad who never hugs you. Like he's got just like kind of a resting heart rate of like Ted Bundy. Like do you know what I'm saying? Like he's just, and it's funny. It's interesting because those guys are such good friends, but could not be less alike as musicians. Mm-hmm. And also, Jacob's got, not to be all sanctimonious about it, but it's like Jacob's got some of these songs that are like radio hits and I want to honor them. And we want to present them semi-faithfully, we're not, and also like his songs are less, they're just not really a vehicle for a wank fest. The way that's on Butch's stuff, like we all really, really open up and kind of go bonkers. I thought about this a lot, and the answer, one way to really directly answer your question is I love both gigs so much. They're both right in my wheelhouse. They're both artists whose music I would drive around and listen to, drive around in my car as a fan. I would pay the cover to watch them both play. With Butch, I'm smiling the whole night, and with Jacob, I'm not. Mm-hmm. I'm enjoying myself equally on both gigs. It's just there's something a little bit more classy and buttoned up about Jacob's thing, and there's something a little more unhinged and reckless and crazy about Butch's thing. And they're just different gears, basically. Mm.
That's awesome, because they kind of live in the same genre, so to speak.
It's not that different. Yeah, it's not that different. But when Butch goes on stage, it is like more Springsteen than Springsteen. Like I'm telling you, you have to watch some. I'll send you a live clip or something. But and I got to match that level. And like I said, I think he's just such a fan of music, and he's such a fan of drums and drumming, and he himself is actually a really good drummer. Like I'm just trying to make him laugh up there. I'm constantly trying to play fills that reference conversations we had earlier. Mm. What's that Janie's crying, I'll try to do that a bunch of times, whatever, just stupid, smart ass, classic rock dad jokes. That's what's going on stage. Like it's multidimensional, right? Because on one hand, there's Butch Walker performing a set of his music to an audience. And on the other hand, there's this subtweet going on that's all us talking to each other, doing smart ass licks and riffs to try to make everybody laugh.
Yeah. Love it. You kind of answered this earlier when you talked about learning songs on guitar and singing it, but what makes a good drummer for a singer-songwriter?
Somebody who's listened to a lot of music, somebody who has a really wide... It's not even about having a wide vocabulary in terms of dexterity, but if the singer says... Man, can you do a thing that's sort of like what Keltner does on Memphis in the Meantime by John Hyatt, which is a ride cymbal pattern that's basically Tequila by the Champs, ding da dee da ding da da, and just being able to know those references, I think, is really, really helpful. When the singer asks, because the singer is trying to tell you who they are, right, by the references that they use, and they're trying to tell you how they want to be perceived. And I think that they want to, in a lot of cases, surround themselves with people who are, this isn't like a shocking thing, but are just relatively simpatico to them. So if Jacob says, man, can you do a beat that's sort of like Train in Vain by The Clash? I know The Clash is one of his favorite groups. And I go, I don't know. I don't really listen to Clash. Like, and then I pull Train in Vain up on Spotify because I've never listened to The Clash. And yes, I have the facility to play do-dets, like, but the fact that I don't know it is a little bit of a tell. You know what I mean? So I think just, and there's no, that's an interesting one because there's no shortcut. There's no cheat code for that. You just have to have listened to a bunch of music. And also, you know, it's a cliche, but you just have to have really good ears and be really sensitive. I mean, think about what Jay Bellerose does. Like Jay Bellerose doesn't, and I would say this to him, he doesn't do anything on the instrument that you're like, oh my God, I can't physically understand how he played that pattern. Like that's not his genius. His genius is in the sounds that he selects and the way that he's able to match the intensity level and just kind of, he just creates this nice little bubble that the song can kind of float around on. And that's what I think makes a good accompanist, whether it's drums or anything, really.
How do you build parts? Because I think from the outside, if from the surface, singer-songwriter drumming can seem very simple and kind of repetitive, but like where's the nuance? Where do you get to insert yourself into the part writing and not have it be overwritten? You know what I mean?
So I keep talking about the line, this mythical line. A song will tell you this. I'm not trying to be all hippy dippy, but like a song will tell you what I would call, let's call it like the minimum effective beat, right? Just meaning like "We Will Rock You" or something like that, or whatever. You kind of know if a song is do da do do da, and you can pick that out in any number of ways by listening to the vocal, observing and listening to the strumming pattern of the acoustic guitar, and so forth. But so my thing is like, all right, I'm going to totally go with you on the basic 30,000 foot architecture of the beat, and then I want to start poking around and finding some little subtle thing that gets close to the line. I'm not talking about overplaying, but I'm just talking about inserting a weird ghost note or an odd kick drum placement or the odd utilization of a tom in a really syncopated part of the beat where it's still, if you had the radio on medium volume and were just walking around your house living your life, you would still hear boom, bop, boom, boom, bop. But if you listen really closely and you were really paying attention, speaking of your Easter eggs, you would go, oh, weird. Okay. Oh, that's cool. You know what I mean? So I'm always trying to find just a little teeny tiny thing. And that was that same teacher that I was telling you about, a guy named Jim Ed Cobbs in Columbus, Ohio, where I'm from, taught me that. Was just like, you just want to honor the song and just try to poke out just enough that somebody, if they were really paying attention, they could see that you're there, but it's not like this grand announcement, basically.
Do you play differently in the studio?
I don't think so. I mean, I probably don't hit as hard. I play less crash cymbals. I mean, I definitely play the crash cymbals less hard in the studio, you know? That's one of those things that like, that should be the first thing they tell you when you start playing the drums. You know what I mean? Like, play the cymbals like 30% less loud than you play the drums. It's such a simple concept, but nobody, if you're a kid, you wouldn't think to do that. It wouldn't really occur to you to do that. You know, remember when you were like a kid starting to play the drums and some older guy was like, hey, you should probably, when you hit the crash cymbal, you should probably hit the bass drum too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You're like, oh, that's how it works.
Right.
Oh, you know what I mean? Because you're a kid and you're going, and there's no kick and you're like, what the hell? And then you hit that kick drum and you're like, oh, cool. All right, that's how that goes. Somebody should have told me that when I was like 12, you know, like, yo, lay off on the cymbals just a little bit, you know?
This is maybe way too inside, but what about InEar mix live and in the studio? Are you like to, like, for me, case in point,
Sure.
If the InEars get too loud or too busy, it's kind of like chaos and I don't know what's happening. So I'm trying to work to bring the volume down and maybe pull things out a little bit more.
Yeah.
Do you have any particular InEar mix or monitoring mix in general?
Well, let's start with, I was going to say let's start with the studio, but I guess this applies across the board. First of all, I don't want to hear too much drums because, like you said, you don't want to. There's only a finite amount of sonic real estate to deal with, right? And I already know what I sound like. I already know how it feels when I play the drums. I don't need that information reinforced. I'm sitting at the drum set. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I need just a little bit because I have in-ears on with, what do you call it? You know, it's a seal, right? So there's definitely noise reduction going on. So I have a whisper of drums. And then I guess so I should separate this out. Live, I'll probably have the vocal higher than anything else. The thinking being, if everything goes to shit, worst case scenario, me and the singer are just playing a duet together, if that makes any sense. Mm-hmm. If the bass player's amp takes a dump and the keys or the guitars or electric guitars way out of tune, blah, 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 and everything around us is melting down, it's me and the singer, and we're gonna get everybody tucked in and get everybody home in time for bed. So in the studio, I think of it similarly. I don't need to hear too many drums. In the studio, it's a little bit more clinical and a little bit less fun, but you're doing a different job, right? We're not, we're trying to lay a foundation for this music. So in the studio, I have the click probably louder than just about anything. Mm-hmm. Because to me, the main goal is like, we want to get these drums locked on this click. Everything else we'll deal with all that stuff later. But like, if the drums and the click are together, we're good. So frequently when I'll get back to the monitor thing in a second, but like when we listen to a playback, I'll just be like, sorry, this is going to bug everybody, but for like 4 minutes, can I just listen to drums and click? And it just sounds like a guy playing a beat for 4 minutes basically. But if I know that the drums and the click are locked, then anything these guys do when I leave, I'm not worried about it. And then beyond that, going back to the monitor thing in the studio, you're trying to pick your allies, right? You got that little box, you got your, so you have infinite range of like, okay, who's playing good today? Whose part really informs how I play? Is there an acoustic guitar? Is there some element that's super rhythmic happening? Well, I'll turn that up. Is that person killing it? Are they playing really good? They get to come up in my ears because they're going to help me. Are you kind of weird and out of time and kind of wonky? Okay, you're fired. You're off. Like, and I don't have to tell anybody that, obviously. I don't say anything, but it's just the people who are helping me get louder and the people who are hurting me get quieter, because you know how that is. Like, have you ever played, I'm sure you've done this, where you like play along to a demo that wasn't done to a click?
Oh, yeah.
And you're like trying to chase it down, or you're trying to play to a click, but there's also a guy whose time sucks. And you're just like, it feels like you're like trying to walk across a balance beam, but somebody's like throwing tennis balls at your nuts. You know what I mean? You're like, dude, like help me help you. Like, you're making this hard. Like, just stop, So then I just turn those people off, and just stick with the click.
Why is it that the drums always sound wrong in that case?
I know, isn't that true? Yeah, well, but I mean that's a whole other topic, which is like studio and live, like sort of politicking / psychology, is like when it does sound wrong, and you're right, it does. Well, there's a literal answer for that, which is I believe that like drums are the most immediate transient that go directly into your ear, which is why the two most important things on a track, in my opinion, are the vocal and the snare drum. Mm-hmm. Like, that's the thing that you hear. You can't not hear that. Keys and guitars get a little bit washy and legato, and I can't really tell what everybody's doing. What are you doing? What are you playing? Blah, blah, blah. But the drums are like immediate, and you can't not hear that. So back to, wow, it sounds, why does it sound off? I don't know. And I'll go, gosh, can we just check the drums and the click real quick? Okay, mute everything else. Let's just check the drums and the click. Yeah, what do you know? Seems like the drums and the click are pretty good. Boy, I don't know what's going on. So yeah, you guys figure that out. But anyway, and I'll take ownership. If I'm off with the click, I'll totally own it. Like, I'm not perfect, but a lot of times it's that. But it's tricky because when you're a drummer, it's like it's interesting because you're piloting the plane, but you're also in the back serving drinks to like make sure you're driving, but you're also like making sure everybody else is cool. and so you want to accommodate. So when the click is the click is the click, that's not changing. But then if a guitar player is like moving around, you're torn because you're like, well, dude, I want to look, if we were playing at a bar, I would try to go with you, but I kind of have this thing jamming into my ear and it kind of has like a binary right and wrong answer attached to it. So like, you're on your own, you know?
Yeah. So is live, are you navigating a bit more? Are you letting yourself kind of push and pull to make sure everyone is cozy, or what's your role there?
So it's different with different people on stage. With Why Not, the bass player is incredible. We have a little bit of a shorthand where like I can tell sometimes if he's starting to rub up against me, it's because he thinks it should be a little faster and he's trying to move us along. There are other people on stage who, like Jacob would tell you this, like he'll say like, it sounds like I'm slowing down. Don't listen to me. Like I'm not telling you I want it to be slower. I'm just accidentally being slower. So like I need you to disregard the information that I'm giving you, and meaning with the slowing down acoustic guitar, and I want you to just plow ahead. And that's kind of a thing with bass players too. Sometimes bass players don't like it if you go back with them, because the kind of bar band keep everybody happy instinct is to just what's the word I want to look for? To kind of moderate and just find everybody's tempo. But really, really evolved bass players, like this guy Chris Morrissey, who I played with for many years with Ben Queller, he was really insistent about that. He was like, I'm behind you on purpose, and it's just a little itsy bit behind you, and I'm doing that to create an effect. And if you go back with me, then all of a sudden we're just slower. Which is why kind of pet peeve of mine when people talk about like the drums like laying back and we're not on a click. I'm like, I don't know, maybe Vinny Caliuta can do that, and maybe you can play the snare just a little bit back, but like to me, and this, I think Mark Juliana agrees with me on this. If you think about it like perspective in art, right? Or even a grid, a Pro Tools grid, whatever. The drums are the grid. The drums are the beat. How's that for profound? The drums are the files are in the computer. The drums are the beat, right? And then like somebody else can quote unquote lay back. Somebody else can quote unquote push, but I can't, I don't think, because then it just sounds like we're slower or faster or uncomfortable. And that's the stuff that bugs people, that they don't even, that's, I'm not like freaking Carlos Vega or whatever, but like I do know enough about groove to know that that's the stuff that makes people nervous, because to me, groove is it's just repetition, and repetition engenders trust. And when you trust that the beat is going to hit at the same spot every time, that's when your head starts moving. So like, that's why to me, the drums just have to be that metronome. And you can hang off the back of me all you want, but I'm going to be the guy, and you can be a little bit late guy.
Man, what a pro tip. Actually have the conversations. The fact that Jacob told you that, because for me, I would be like, wherever he goes, I'm going.
Well, no, and that would be my first instinct too, of course.
Because he's singing, and then I was like, out front.
I was like, at some point I started doing that to like you, same as you. I'm just trying to be an A student. And then it occurred to me like, my God, if I go with him too far, the song is just going to stop. Like it's going to get so slow. You know what I mean? So yeah. And that's just one of those things where he's like, man, I'm thinking about 50 things up there. I'm singing the song and I'm thinking about the next song, and I'm looking at that guy in the audience and seeing if he's having a bad night and blah, blah, blah. And sorry, my acoustic guitar might get a little weird. Can you just kind of rein me in?
Love it. Well, we are at the hour mark. I could go all day with you, but I want to respect your time. Let's go with the last question I ask everyone. What was your first snare drum?
Ludwig student model. It was probably an Acrolite. So this would have been 91 or 92. That kind of gray mist, kind of sparkly finish. Probably had the olive badge with a black protective, like a school case that you would take to school for snare drum lessons. Oh, you can still find them. They're like $150 on eBay. I wish I still had it, but
the Black Galaxy you're talking about. It's
that's
almost
it.
Looks like a Black Beauty, but it's not. Yeah.
It's definitely not.
I literally have that drum in the studio behind this wall for a session that I'm working on.
Are you using it? Can
Yeah,
you get it? Yeah.
It's got a tune low with like a half of a handkerchief taped to it, and it's exactly what this dude wants.
That's
rock.
amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, also, it's not the drum, it's you. You know what I mean? Like,
It's partly the drum.
yeah, I know. But like, I just learned that from living in New York all those years and playing on crummy house kits. And then Sean Pelton would sit down and all of a sudden the shitty house kit sounds like it cost $5,000. Like, wow, what changed? Gee, I wonder.
Well, that is it, man. Thank you so much. I learned a lot. I learned how to play one headlight properly. We'll see what happens next weekend when I have to do it.
Yeah, very good, man. Well, I appreciate you reaching out. I love it. I'm a fan of the pod, so keep them coming.
That is it for this week's episode. If you like the show, please give us a review. Give us a 5-star rating on iTunes or Spotify, wherever you're getting this podcast. Make sure you're subscribed to our YouTube channel. Go check out some of Mark's work. You can follow him at Mark Stepro, and we'll see you next week.